Good afternoon, everyone. So this part is clear, or still you have the doubt, any problem? Let me open this. Just give me 1 minute. Yes, dear. Good afternoon. Yeah. Good afternoon. No, you are asking from the poverty. I was discussing that when you are comparing these two. So base year means the consumption pattern, all the informations, all the variables. Basically, you are considering that particular year. Like when YKL considered the PLB, poverty line baskets, so that time they have taken the base year 73-74. So 73-74, that was the base year, and all the decisions like the consumption pattern, PLB, they have taken according to the consumption pattern of that base year. Question raised ki the same base year is still you are using for this year, I mean the current year 2004-5, there is 5 you estimated, but that consumption pattern is not reflecting. That consumption pattern 73-74 is not reflecting today's consumption pattern. So if it's not reflecting, then how you are estimating the poverty today? Okay, that was the question, that was the issue raised. Then they changed the base year. Then 2004 and 5 then got taken, and that's continuing. Okay, sure. So whatever discussing here, capital receipt. So government receipts. So government receipts is divided into two parts. One is the capital receipts and another is the revenue receipts. Same things like expenditure. Here, if government received any money, and if that money received by the government is related to assets and assets and liabilities, then that money is not, that receipt is known as capital receipts. Not related is known as a revenue receipt. Similar, you take the example. Suppose government borrowed some amount this year, So if government borrowed some amount this year, so money borrowed by the government is the receipt for that year. But the equivalent amount liabilities created for the government. So it's come under the capital receipts because it has increased your liability. Disinvestment. Suppose government selling their assets, their companies, their capital, and then the money received by the in that particular year. Again, it is come under the capital receipts. Why? Because that much of assets has declined. Okay. So borrowing you can take, borrowing you can take. Suppose the states who took the loan in the previous year, this year they paid the tax. Loan they paid it. So I received. So here the recovery of loans. Yeah, I received, but claim has declined that particular time. When the moment I received, claim has declined. So the money received in that particular year, again it is a capital receipts. Why? Claim has declined. Revenue receipts. Take the example of taxes collected by the government. Here you take only the receipt part. So revenue receipt means money or taxes received by the government. Received by the government. Okay. So the money received by the government, okay, or government receiving the taxes, suppose. So suppose you are paying tax to the government. So this year you earned, you paid to the government. So money you received this year, in future, suppose in future, are you not going to claim it? So government receiving these taxes, tax amount, you take one of the example, not decline any liabilities, not decline any assets, but okay, so it is not related to asset and liabilities. So I'm not decreasing my assets and I'm also not increasing my liabilities because I'm not borrowing. So the money received by the government, if it is not related to assets or liabilities, that money is part of revenue receipts. Okay, so just you write, all of you. First, yeah. Government receipt, government receipt, government receipt, government receipts can be divided into two parts. Government receipts can be divided into two parts. One, first you write revenue receipts. Second, you write capital receipts. First you write revenue receipts. Second, you write capital receipts. Clear? Write first revenue receipts. Right. Any receipts of the government, that does not relate with assets, or liabilities, are the part of revenue receipts. Okay, right? Revenue receipts includes the following. First you write taxes, then you write one by one. Okay, first you write A, taxes, then you write income tax. Okay. Second you write corporation tax, income tax, corporation tax. Write all taxes more or less. Corporation tax, excise duty, GST, customs duty. You also write cess. You also write surcharges, okay, etc. etc. Okay, etc. So these all are taxes. B. Second, you write non-taxes. non-taxes. Clear. Then you write in non-taxes. Okay, first you write in non-taxes surplus of RBI. Yes, surplus of RBI. Surplus of RBI. Clear. What is the surplus of RBI? Surplus of RBI, see, one is the way of understanding. You are knowing that we have discussed with you that RBI provides loan to different banks at repo rate, at bank rate, at MSF. Also, if banks violates or not following any rules and regulations, then RBI imposing fines on penalty on the banks. So in this process, RBI left with money. Okay. Let us consider RBI is not the regulatory authority. RBI is not the monetary authority. RBI is just like a normal bank. So like normal bank you take, so the money surplus amount left, that is we are saying the profit. But in the case of RBI, we cannot term it as a profit. We cannot term it. Because motive of RBI is not the profit. Motive of the RBI is to stabilization of the economy, okay, bringing efficiency in the financial system. These are the basically motive behind it. Clear? These are the motive behind it. So RBI's main aim is to bring efficiency, stability in the country. Profit is not the motive for RBI. So due to technical reason, the money left with the RBI is not considered as profit, but it is considered as surplus of RBI. So normally we are using the word surplus of RBI. Clear? And if any surplus left with the RBI, then government is authorized to use it. Okay. And RBI is basically transferring this amount to the government. Problem raised when Urjit Patel was the governor of this RBI. Okay, so under his governorship, the issue raised because they already handed over huge surplus to government, and government wanted more surplus, and it was one of the issue of conflict. I mean, it became the one of the conflict issue. Okay, so yes, that was in the news during the last few months. Okay, of the service. So even Section 7 was raised because Section 7 of RBI 934, it says that the government can give the order and the RBI has to RBI has to follow this. So surplus of RBI is the non-tax, but it come under the revenue receipts, right? Surplus of RBI. Then you write interest receipts. Yes, interest receipts. Next, dividends, profits, etc. etc. Okay, interest you can write, dividends, profits, etc. you can write. These are known as the non-tax receipts, but this combined is known as the revenue receipts. Clear to all? Now next you write capital receipts. Capital receipts. Capital receipts. Okay, right, capital receipts. Any receipts of the government that changes or related to any receipts of the government that changes or related to assets or liabilities of the government, are the part of the capital receipts. are the part of the capital receipts. These are you write, yeah, write like this, capital receipts includes, first you write recovery of loans, recovery of loans from states and other parties, recovery of loans from states and other parties. Second you write borrowings by the government, like this, borrowings by the government, borrowings by the government, borrowings by the government, borrowings by the government from domestic market, yeah, domestic economy, just you write from the domestic economy, as well as international market, as well as from international market, as well as from international market. Clear? Next one you write disinvestment proceeds. You write disinvestment proceeds, etc. Then you write it's disinvestment proceeds means you are knowing that suppose recently the government of India disinvested or privatized or sold the Air India to the Tata, definitely the government received the amount. It is known as the disinvestment proceeds. So why it is come under capital receipts? Because that much claim, that assets claims you have declined. Now you are not claiming, the Tata is claiming on that ownership. So in this way we can define it. Clear? And ETC means any other is come, right? Okay, dear. So receipts and expenditure part is over. Now, so this must you understand. Now you can come back here. So this way we clear our concept, expenditure and the receipts. Now you come to the budget, capital budget. So capital budget is what? It's related to capital expenditure and capital receipts. Simple in one line. And you are knowing now the capital expenditure and capital receipts. So budget means related to expenditure receipts to the government, but when you say capital budget, it's related to capital expenditure and capital receipts. Similarly, when you're talking about the revenue budget, budget means expenditure receipts. So your revenue budget related with revenue expenditure and revenue receipts. In this way, you can just explain. So that is the reason I requested that we can clear our concept in this format. But when you are going to write in exams and anywhere, you please follow this one. Now, when you're going in this way, you will not get any problem because now each and everything you are knowing this. Clear? So if this concept is clear, then only you are going to differentiate different types of deficits. Okay. Now next we are going to discuss with you different type of deficits. Types of deficits. 1, fiscal deficit. Second, revenue deficit. Third, effective revenue deficit. Fourth, primary deficit. Fiscal deficit means FD. Revenue deficit means RD. Effective revenue deficit means ERD. Primary deficit means PD. बोलिए जरूरत है. Okay. So these are the different types of measures we are using it. We are using it in the Indian economy. Yeah, there are other concepts that we will come one by one. So these four, currently we are using these measures. Currently we are using it. Fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, effective revenue deficit, and primary deficit. Let's discuss first, yes, what are these and how this is going to affect the overall economy. Okay. And tomorrow I will give you the current data related to this one. And this current data is going to change in the few days, just 1st of Feb, since the budget, the government is going to present the budget on 1st Feb 2023, next month, the Feb 1st. So all the, information is going to change. So, but you can get it, information. So now I'm going to discuss first fiscal deficit. Okay. So fiscal deficit FD, short form is FD. FD is defined as, so you can write FD, which is equal to FD, which is equal to total expenditure, the expenditure of the government minus total receipts of the government excluding borrowings. Okay, but you can write fiscal deficit FD equal to total expenditure of the government minus total receipts of the government excluding borrowings. Okay, fiscal deficit equal to total expenditure of the government minus total receipts of the government excluding borrowings. Why we are excluding these borrowings? And you can also write FD in this format. FD is equal to total expenditure. Now you are getting that total expenditure equal to capital expenditure C, revenue expenditure RE. So if you add capital expenditure plus revenue expenditure, that will give you total expenditure minus you can write RR means revenue receipts plus capital receipts excluding borrowings. So you can also write in this format. Check. Let me check your questions. If any doubts you have, you can ask me. Yes, dear, tell me. One questions, yeah. Yeah. Second, if you are asking if any state government take huge loan and unable to return, then the state any chance to bankrupt or central government help this state? See, there is a possibility that the state central government will help you, but they may put some conditions. Because finally central government has to help. Okay. But to what extent you are getting the help from the central government and when you will get, that is the question mark. Okay. But they will help you, and as per the finance commission's division, every year you are getting huge amount from the central government, central taxes you are getting as per the division between the central and state from central taxes. So I will discuss you in that, the finance commission, then you will get it. Every year the state government is getting fund from the central government every year, other than the planning assistance. Just focus here. Why you're defining fiscal deficit is equal to total expenditure of the government. So it's fine, total expenditure minus total receipts of the government. But only one thing I want to focus here, excluding borrowings. Okay, why you are excluding borrowings to get the fiscal deficit? And the same thing you're writing in this form, because when you say total expenditure of the government, so now you are knowing that all expenditure you can divide into capital expenditure, revenue expenditure. You have written that, and all receipts you can divide in revenue receipts and capital receipts. But excluding borrowing, you are attaching with the capital receipts. Just think why it is so. So suppose first you are calculating total expenditure of the government, T. So you are not going to borrow first. Suppose you are not going to borrow first, but how much borrowing you need it. How can you calculate? So first you have to see the total expenditure, and then you can calculate the total receipts without borrowing. Till now you are not borrowed. So how much your total expenditure is more than total receipts, the deficit amount you are going to borrow. And this fiscal deficit you are calculating, say 2022-23 in particular year. So in this particular year, you have to take the total expenditure you incurred in this particular year, and total receipts you received it in this particular year, total receipts. First you take the difference, and what is the difference amount? How much total expenditure is more than total receipts? That much amount you are going to borrow. Suppose B amount of borrow amount, you borrowed it. So the moment you add B amount, then it is going to be equal to zero. It is going to be equal. Because the difference, how much expenditure is there. Suppose expenditure is your 100 rupee. Suppose expenditure 100 rupees. Without borrowing, receipt is 80 rupees. Fine. So definitely expenditure is more than the receipt. So deficit is what? 20 rupees. Borrowing is 20 rupees. So if 20 rupees you borrowed, and borrowed amount if you add it here, so it is going to give you 100 rupees. These two are going to be same, equal. So deficit you only calculate overall in a fiscal year, because if you borrowed, so borrowed amount in this particular year is already part of your capital receipt as per the definitions. So how much you are in deficit, overall deficit, you have to calculate excluding the borrowing amount, that amount you borrowed in that particular year. It is every year calculation here, remember, it's not accumulated in the previous one. In that particular year, how much money you are spending, how much money you are received. So all calculation is based on that. That we have to understand. Clear? So that's the way you are defining the fiscal deficit. देखो clear है? Clear? Now write about fiscal deficit. Go back. Fiscal deficit you write. Right. Fiscal deficit is defined as, these are few lines. Fiscal deficit is defined as difference between total expenditure of the government and total receipts of the government excluding borrowings. The same things we are putting in language. Excluding borrowings, right? Since the shortfall in receipts, over expenditure must be covered through borrowings, full stop. Therefore, fiscal deficit gives or represents the overall borrowing requirements of the government, over a given fiscal year. Okay, full stop, right? And over the given fiscal year, full stop, right? It represents the net additions to the level of public debt, during a given fiscal year. So public debt is what? You understand it. Public debt, when you say public debt, okay, you can say debt, no issue. But public debt is means till today, how much loan amount or liabilities amount is accumulated till today. That is a public debt. From taking your past, the total liabilities with the central government is the total debt amount. Maybe domestic, maybe international, external one. But every year, if every year you are in deficit, it means government is borrowing every year some amount, and that much amount is added in already existing the total public debt. So how much total public debt is there? In that amount, again you added this year also. So it is a net additions to the, already you have the net addition to the public debt. Simple one, right? You can say. ठीक है dear? Just check and try to get this. What is the question? Yeah, one question you. Sir, is there any role of remittance in fiscal policy? See dear, it's a very basic understanding. Remittance you're talking about, but remittance is received by the India Okay, we are receiving the remittances, but remittances going to the government. Ask yourself, remittances received, India is receiving, but where it is going? It is going to the normal public. Your family, our family, they are earning remittance, they are sending remittances to us. It is not going to the part of the government receipt. So why you are relating this? Clear? Public debt. Now next is your revenue deficit. Revenue deficit. That is RD. RD. Clear? RD is equal to revenue expenditure minus revenue receipts. See, it is RD. RD is defined like this. So what exactly RD represents? What exactly RD represents? So if you think about RD, revenue deficit, so revenue expenditure is what? Revenue expenditure, it is in the nature of consumption expenditure. Revenue receipts, it is a receipt you are getting, I mean, without decreasing your assets and without increasing your liabilities. This, the understanding you develop in this way. See, technically we can't write revenue receipt is the income of the government. We can't write. If you see the government documents, budget of the government of India, you will get, yes, revenue receipts, capital receipt. These are written, yes, but you are not getting the income of the government. It's not written. Okay. But for understanding, you can compare, you can think like that. Suppose you are working somewhere, and if you are working somewhere and you are earning income, say you are getting 50,000 rupees per month. So if you receive 50,000 rupees per month, then you are, it is your income, fine. But ask yourself, this amount you are getting after selling your assets or decreasing your assets, so you can say no. Are you getting this amount and this amount has increased your liabilities? So you can say no. So income, what you are earning, basically it is the equivalent to the concept of revenue receipts of the government. Equivalent to the revenue receipts of the government. But technically revenue receipts, we are not terming as income, we are just writing the revenue receipts. So you just write revenue receipts because we have to follow this, the normal principle, revenue receipts. So, but revenue receipts of the government, if you think it is the resources generated by the government without decreasing any assets, without increasing any liabilities. So, it is sort of income of the government, you can assume. Don't write, but you can assume. You can say equivalent to the income earned by you. And revenue expenditure is equivalent, no, it is the nature of consumption expenditure of the government. So, if you are getting revenue deficit, then when revenue expenditure is more than the revenue receipts, then only the deficit amount is there. So if there is a revenue deficit, what it implies? So it simply implies that, okay, government is not in a position to meet current consumption, or day-to-day expenditure, day-to-day expenditure from their own resources. So even for meeting the day-to-day expenditure, government is depending on borrowings. Which is not good for the government. And it is one of the reason that I will discuss this later on, the FRBM Act. If you see FRBM Act, 2003, if you see the target, so target is giving is the fiscal deficit should be 3% and RD should be 0. This target is mentioned in this FRBM Act. Bring FD 3% and make RD 0. So there is a concept, there is a reason behind it. So first you write revenue deficit first. Please write revenue deficits, right? It is revenue deficit is defined as, right? Revenue deficit is defined as difference between revenue expenditure, and revenue receipts. Revenue deficit is defined the difference between revenue expenditure and revenue receipts. Clear? Okay, full stop, right? Revenue deficit represents government is not able to meet consumption expenditure, that is day-to-day expenditure from their own resources. Full stop, right? Even for consumption expenditure oblique current consumption expenditure, even for current consumption expenditure, government depends on borrowings. Okay, full stop. Revenue deficit, higher revenue deficit for long term is not good for the economy. And there is a possibility that economy may go to debt trap. May I am writing, there is a reason behind it. Okay, जा भी सकता है because depending on the other borrowings, but generally there is a possibility may go to debt trap. Clear? Means you are going to pay amount from borrowings. So your debt you are going to pay from your borrowings. So keeps accumulating and you are going to face the debt trap. Clear? So this point is clear to all of you. Just read once. Just think about it. Clear? Any doubts? Clear? And you written that? Good. Now, what you have written FD? Now, only one question I am asking you. Then we are going to discuss the implication of FRBM Act, that is the FD should be 3% and RD should be 0. If I am asking you, ki loan is good or bad? Loan is good or bad? So only one answer we can give, ki loan may be good and may be bad, depending on the purpose for which we are taking the loan. If suppose I am taking loan for asset creations or capital formation, then it is good for me. Why? Because that amount I created capital or assets, and creation of capital assets is giving me potential, it's increasing my potential to earn income. Okay, and it may be possible in future I can pay back all my dues and I can continue with this capital or assets. Yeah, it's one of the possibility. But if I am taking loan and I am consuming, so that amount is not helping me to increase in production potential, or is not helping me to increase any sort of income. So there is a then we can say that the loan for consumption purpose is not good. Learn it from home, dear. Our parents never say you can consume more than your income. Always say you consume less than your income or at least equal than your income. Why they are saying that? Because you should not go in the debt trap. So just a small concept, bring it here. If FD, fiscal deficit, you are writing CE, capital expenditure, plus revenue expenditure, minus revenue receipts, plus capital receipts excluding borrowings. That you can write. Now, the same FD you can write in this format, just break it, you can write revenue expenditure minus revenue receipt. You can write, I just open this bracket and I am writing RE with RR plus we can write CE minus CR excluding borrowings. Excluding borrowings. Then we can write, just check. And RE minus RR, that is revenue expenditure minus revenue receipt, is nothing but RD, revenue deficit. Just I defined it. So if you think about FRBM Act, so targeting a fiscal deficit, the central government, it's about 3%, and 3% what? 3% of GDP. And RD is equal to 0. It means when RD is going to be 0, it means the whole revenue expenditure you are meeting with the revenue receipts. You are meeting with the revenue receipts. So deficit, and your FD is 3%. It means the 3% of deficit of FD, it is mainly due to this capital expenditure. Because if RD is 0, means your capital revenue expenditure you are meeting with the revenue receipts. So this 3% of FD is not coming from this part, but it is wholly it's coming from the capital expenditure. Just think, what is the meaning of that? So you are getting this here. If you think about, then as I discussed with you, yes, loan, if you take the normal one, normal public, being the normal citizens, and take the personal as the individual choice or individual level, then you are knowing that the borrowing for consumption is not good. and this concept you bring it here. Then you can say RD should be 0. It means revenue expenditure, consumption expenditure, government must fund from their revenue receipts. But loan, it is allowed for the government, but due to only capital expenditure. So what the general thinking we have, on the same thinking the government is also working, and that's the FRBM Act saying that. So these things you can relate with that. Clear? Now next is ERD. See, is it clear? Check all of you. If you have any doubts, any problems, then please tell me. These things you are getting or not, because it's analysis part and you have to know. Public debt or public debt, you just assume it is a total loan amount or total liabilities of the central government. Here we are talking about the central government, so we concern on that. Public debt means loan or total liabilities of the government. Public here referred with the government. Okay, public debt means it's a loan or total liabilities of the government. Okay, you are asking, sir, FRBM Act 2003 is the only for central government or the state should follow this act? For state government, it is FRL, fiscal responsibility legislation. More or less same provisions, but name is different. It is the FRL, fiscal responsibility legislations. Okay, FRBM Act is only for the central government. Clear? And every state having their own legislation, that is known as the FRL, fiscal responsibility legislation. How can country like our India attain budget surplus without compromising in social development, attaining inclusive growth? Is there any way, sir? See, right now it's not possible for the, at this time, it's not possible. Even achievement, budget surplus is the very, I mean, you are talking about what we can say, but practically it's not possible at this moment. If you want to expand your economy, you have to go for a capital expenditure. And for poverty, for unemployment, and other social sectors, you have to spend. And since the government earning but limited amount, so government is going to face some deficits. Surplus, it's very far away from this one. Okay. Clear. Now next, we should go to the next ERD. That is your effective revenue deficit. ERD. Now ERD, effective revenue deficit, is equal to revenue deficit minus grants given for creation of capital assets. Yes, dear. It is your revenue deficit. Right, all of you? ERD, revenue deficits. So whatever revenue deficit amount, okay, in that if you subtract the grants given for creation of capital assets, then it is known as ERD, effective revenue deficits. So you remember this thing, you can write it here. Revenue deficits is what? Is RE, revenue expenditure, minus revenue receipts. Remember, that is the meaning of revenue deficits. So in revenue expenditure, already we have calculated or included, not calculated, included the grants, all grants you written that time. You go back to your class notes. We have just discussed before this grants. So all grants given by the central government to states and other parties, we considered as revenue expenditure. We considered as revenue expenditure. Fine. But you are also knowing that one part of grants used, because suppose you given the grants to the state government, so you are taking transaction at that point. So all the grants all the grants are coming under the revenue expenditure. But some of the grants are used for capital, creation of capital assets, because you given to states, instead of using for capital assets. So what the central government done it, and it is basically it is a new concept which was introduced in 2012. Okay. So what the central government done it, any grants, if they are used directly or indirectly, or indirectly you can say, or suppose central government is giving grants, but it's forming any assets, or just written that, creating any capital assets. So that grant, that much amount you have to subtract from revenue deficit amount. So suppose 100 rupees was your revenue deficit, and 10 rupees you are used for grants used for this purpose. So ERD will be your 90 rupees. So if you calculate ERD, so ERD representing this deficit is purely due to the consumption expenditure. Because in revenue expenditure, some overlapping it was there. But that overlapping due to the grants which can use for capital creations or creation of capital assets, that much amount you subtracted. So left amount represents deficit purely due to the consumption expenditure. Please write, all of you. ERD has been introduced by an amendment. ERD has been introduced by an amendment to the FRBM Act, through the Finance Act 2012, through the Finance Act 2012, through the Finance Act 2012. Full stop, right? ERD has been defined as the difference between ERD has been defined as the difference between the revenue deficit, and the grants for creation of capital assets. Clear? Full stop. Change the para, you write, because government also defined what is the meaning of grants for creation of capital assets, right? Grants for creation of capital assets are defined as write in inverted comma, the grants given by the central government, to the state governments, comma, constitutional authorities or bodies, comma, autonomous bodies and other scheme implementing agencies and other scheme implementing agencies for creation of capital assets for creation of capital assets check dear. This part is clear. Clear. Just read once, all of you, and tell me. Primary deficit. Okay. So primary deficit is defined as fiscal deficit minus interest paid. Means if you're calculating for 2022-23, so in this year, first you calculate the fiscal deficit for whole year. And in this particular year, how much money you paid as interest? That interest amount you subtract. The remaining amount of fiscal deficit is known as primary deficit. Clear? Check what the primary deficit you mean. Think about it. What primary deficit is representing? If you are able to get, see, all deficits, all measures are giving you different concepts. If you are able to understand, then all deficits giving you the same different concept. But if you are not able to understand, then for you it will be only deficit. And if that is the condition, then again we can't use this concept for the analysis purpose. So we have to think about it. Fiscal deficit is representing overall borrowings of the government, overall deficit due to all possible means, whatever reasons. Revenue deficit represents deficits due to the consumption expenditure. But yes, some overlapping is there, like the grants used for capital asset creations. If that part you subtract from RD, then remaining amount is known as the ERD, effective revenue deficits. But here primary deficit is defined as fiscal deficit minus interest paid. So how much fiscal deficit is there of central government? And in that particular same year, suppose in a particular year you are taking the fiscal deficit, and same year, how much interest the paid by the government? If that much amount you subtract from fiscal deficit, then you're going to get the primary deficit. But what exactly primary deficit represents? Just think, primary deficit concept. Just I'm taking the space. Okay. Suppose I am taking this, you can take other years. Few fiscal years I am taking it. Try to understand this example. Back you can take any year, but I am just taking, considering to understand you. I convince you this concept, clear this concept. Suppose 1718, even this process you can start. It is started already from the last several years. And from that's you take even after independence, we're just going through this. So suppose 1718 you take this year, the government of India implemented fiscal policy. Definitely there was deficit and government of India borrowed some amount. So this year borrowed amount was small amount. In next year, again government of India implemented new fiscal policy and some amount maybe they paid of the earlier dues, but again they borrowed. So this amount accumulated, this amount is going to be higher one. Same things happened here, again it's accumulated, again it's accumulated, again it's accumulated like this. Keeps increased, keeps increasing. And this few years, due to the pandemic and the government high deficit, it's again going up. It's increased. Okay. Just think about in 2012 and 13 you are coming. This fiscal year you are coming. So in this fiscal year, what you are doing first? So first you are calculating the total expenditure and you are calculating total receipts for this fiscal year. We are thinking about 2022 and 23. So in total expenditure, already you have taken the revenue expenditure, revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. So in revenue expenditure, the interest you already paid in this particular year, you already included. The interest you paid in this particular year, fiscal year, you included in the revenue expenditure. And after taking all the expenditure, you come out deficit, which is your fiscal deficit. Suppose you calculate fiscal deficit. Yes, this much is my fiscal deficit. So fiscal deficit represents overall deficit in that particular year. Overall deficit. So this deficit is maybe due to current fiscal policy and maybe due to the past fiscal policy. And how can you include the past fiscal policy's impact? Just see. Till here you take this boundary. I am taking this boundary. So till this point, this total public debt created. It is the total public debt for this public debt. Suppose in the last of this. So total public debt this created is due to the previous fiscal policies, and on this public debt you are paying interest in this fiscal year, On this public debt you are paying interest on this fiscal year. But interest paid in this fiscal year is not the reason. I mean, interest you are paying this fiscal year, but this interest amount is, interest you are paying is due to what? Interest you are paying on this public debt. But this public debt is not the outcome of this current fiscal year. It's not the outcome of this current fiscal year. But interest you are paying this fiscal year. And interest is the one of the part of your revenue expenditure when you are calculating total expenditure. So fiscal deficit when you are calculating is the overall expenditure you calculated. And overall receipts you calculated without borrowing. And then you are saying okay, this much is the borrowing requirement. But the fiscal deficit requirement or fiscal deficit, what you are saying, it is due to the overall requirement. But one part is due to the current fiscal policy and the interest you paid it is the past fiscal policies. So that's the reason if you are in fiscal deficit, FD, if you are subtracting the interest payment, if you are subtracting it, then it is going to give you PD, primary deficits. So you're talking about. So when you subtract the interest payment from FD, you are going to get primary deficits, and this primary deficit represents deficits due to current fiscal policy of the government. Just check. Please. check कर लो dear and yeah, please check. देख लो बाबू, just right. Yes. Sir, if okay, fine. How can country like our India? That's I already entertained you. I mean, answered you. Sir, was there any yearly budget of the government during 5-year plans, as we see now, or was it 5 years basis? No, dear. Budget always presented per year, annual. Every year budget presented. Yeah, the expenditure you're going to allot on the different sectors and different plans, it was according to the plan you made it. But every year you are presenting the budget and getting approval from the parliament. Okay, clear? Check dear. Sir, please repeat PD. Focus to this analysis, this discussion. If you focus, you can get very easy. Fiscal deficit we have discussed with you dear. So fiscal deficit we have discussed with you what you are getting. It is overall deficit of the government in a particular fiscal year. That is the overall deficit. Overall deficit. It is the total deficit government is going to face. Clear? Now, in total deficits, how you calculate it? So you have taken the total expenditure of that particular fiscal year and total receipts of that particular year without borrowing. Now, in total expenditure, you have considered all expenditure, that is revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure. In revenue expenditure, you also included interest rate paid in this particular year. What do you think about it? The interest you paid in this particular year, mainly on, I'm using the word clearly, mainly on the public debt, on this public debt. Why? Because, and this public debt you think is accumulated due to the previous year's fiscal policies. So when you implemented fiscal policy in this year, till now, this fiscal policy not contributed in this amount of public debt, not contributed. So interest you paid in this public debt on this public debt in this year, it is the outcome of the previous fiscal policies. Yes, true. The amount you are going to borrow from in this year, definitely mostly you are going to pay in the next year. So that is going to be included in the public debt, and for the next year, same way you have to do that. So interest you paid in this fiscal year mainly on the public debt that's created till this time. But that is not the outcome of the current fiscal policy. But if you want to estimate or calculate the how much deficit is due to the current fiscal policy. For this purpose, you have to go for primary deficits. So primary deficit is basically representing here. Primary deficit is basically representing here the deficits due to the current fiscal policy. देखो clear है? देखो dear. I repeated PD. Is it clear to all? देख लो, आप सभी देख लो. Just you check, all of you, and tell me. Just check. I'm giving you just take few minutes, few seconds, and just think. Clear here? Write, all of you, please write. Primary deficits. If you write few words, it is the difference between the fiscal deficit and the interest payments. What you're writing? It is the difference between the fiscal deficit and the interest payments. Okay. It is the difference between the fiscal deficit and the interest payments. Full stop, right? It excludes the burden of the past debt and shows SHOWS and shows the net increase in the government's, all right, it represents or shows the net increase in the government's indebtedness due to the current year's fiscal operations. Okay, full stop, right? A reduction in primary deficit is reflective of government's efforts at bridging the fiscal gap, bridging the fiscal gap during a fiscal year. Just check. During a fiscal year. Clear to all? Fine. Now, there is no questions? Yes, dear. Now it's clear. Now, so different types of deficits clear. Now, we are going to discuss about next, if a country has higher fiscal deficit, because next step we are going to connect you with the FRBM Act. So, if a country is facing higher fiscal deficit, if fiscal deficit is higher, then how the higher fiscal deficit is going to affect the overall country. So, first we can take that. Suppose a country has the higher fiscal deficit. higher fiscal deficit a country is facing. Clear? So if any country, say India, is facing the higher fiscal deficit, so what are the ways? What are the ways to fund the deficit? So there are two ways. There are two ways, but in all the ways, the government has to approach. Government has to approach first RBI. First RBI. So if government having the higher fiscal deficit or fiscal deficit, you write here. Fiscal deficit, you write. Fiscal, then government of India, the government of India, in any case, they will approach to the RBI. They will approach to the RBI. Yeah? Approach to the RBI because RBI is the bank of government of India. If government of India needs any fund domestically, so domestic arrangement of funds, it is the responsibility of RBI. Domestic arrangement of funds, it is the responsibility of RBI. If government of India needs fund from outside of the country, then it is the responsibility of Ministry of Finance to arrange the fund. So external borrowings comes through the Ministry of Finance, Government of India. But domestic borrowings, it's a Government of India doing through the RBI. Okay, so one way is what? Government of India can borrow from the RBI, one of the possibility. So Government of India will give GSEC. Government of India will give GSEC. That already I discussed, GSEC, government securities. It's their debt instruments. So Government of India will give GSEC to RBI, and RBI will lend money to the Government of India. Yeah, RBI will lending money to RBI. Okay. If it is so, if it is happening, when basically the Government of India is borrowing from the RBI, then it is known as borrowings from RBI, or you can say primary borrowings. Borrowings from RBI, or you can say primary borrowings. Clear? It is there. So one possibility. Second possibility is what? The Government of India can approach RBI, but Government of India can say, no, it should be market borrowing, or Government of India wants market borrowing, not from the RBI. So Government of India gives GSEC to RBI, and RBI sells the GSEC in economy. You can sell in the economy. An economy, who can buy? Who can buy? So you are knowing, I discussed, the banks can buy, the GSEC, other institution can buy, public they can buy. So GSEC they are selling in the economy, or you can say market. Market means economy. Okay, in the market, and then public is going to buy this. So public giving money to RBI, the money goes from public to RBI, and then from RBI it is going to the Government of India account. So RBI, in the behalf of Government of India, sells it to the market, where the banks can buy, other institution can buy, even public can buy. So money basically is come from the market. So market basically, the RBI sold it and they collected the money, and RBI transferred this money to Government of India. So it is known as market borrowing. Why? Because finally Government of India is borrowed from the market. So second type of funding is market borrowings. Is known as market borrowings. Second type of funding is known as market borrowings. Check here. So if government is facing deficit, then government can fund their deficit from two ways. One is known as borrowings from the RBI, and other is known as market borrowings. Just check. Yeah. Now, we are going to see one by one. There is two possibilities. One is the market borrowings, one is the borrowing from the central bank, that is the RBI, which is known as the primary borrowings. Now, first we are discussing about market borrowings. Market borrowings. So, in market borrowings, you have to understand this. Okay, the government is going to borrow from the market, definitely through the RBI, but government is finally borrowing from the market. So, just you think, if it is the total economy, I mean, it's not total, it's the economy, suppose. So, suppose it's the economy, and this circle also represents total fund available for lending purpose in the whole banking system or in whole economy. If you take the whole economy, the total amount available for lending purpose is the whole circle we are assuming. Clear? So this circle represents total fund available for borrowings. Clear? So if you can divide who can borrow this fund, so one is the government and second is the private sector. And who is mainly under private sector? Investors. Mainly the private investors, because if you compare with the amount of money they are borrowing, so basically investors, you can corporates, you can say private investors, they are basically borrowing huge amount. See, nowadays if you just observing, so you are getting basically call from the bank officials call, you are receiving a call from the bank officials, and they are asking you basically, sir, you need loan, maybe private or loan. Generally you are receiving loan for personal loan, they are asking you. So if suppose they are asking for loan, don't say no. If next time you're receiving loan, please ask, yes, I want loan. So you ask him, yes, I want to loan, and can you give me? So since they call you for giving you, so definitely they say, yes, sir. So you ask him, just tell me at what rate of interest you are going to give me loan. Okay, at what rate of interest? So they can tell you, okay, maybe around say 13% to say 22%, because since lending rate has increased, so personal rate of interest, personal loan is always, it is the higher side. So they can tell you, sir, 23% to 22%, 13% to 22% I can give you. Ask them, this is the range, but you're going to give me a particular rate of interest. What is that? So they can ask you, sir, give me some information, then only I can tell you. So if you provide some information, then on the basis of your information, they can tell you, okay, sir, I can give you at 17% or 16% rate of interest. You just think, from a range of interest rates, they are reaching to a particular rate of interest. What is the reason behind it? Because the moment you're giving information, they can give you, they are calculating the credit rank or your rank of whether you are upper side of credit worthy customers or lower side of that. If you are there getting this, your score is really very good. Okay, so if you are credit worthy customer, then they are going to charge the low rate of interest. If you are more risky customers, they are going to charge very high rate of interest. This is the normal criteria. So if you take the government is always ranked as number one. Because if you lend to the government, then possibility of NPA is zero. Because if lended to the government, time bound manner, you will get principal amount, you can get interest amount. Okay, you are getting from the government. So lending to the government is always safe. Clear? So how much government wants to borrow from the economy? If government is able to borrow this. This concept you have to remember. So suppose earlier, and see, total fund only government and private sector can only borrow out of this total fund. If suppose fiscal deficit is very low amount and government is borrowing this much amount, so the whole amount is left. Suppose this much amount borrowed by the government. So the whole amount left for the private sector. Okay, but let us consider government facing the higher fiscal deficit. Government facing the higher fiscal deficit. And to fund this deficit, government is borrowing huge amount from the market. So huge amount government borrowed from the market. Now, if you take the whole amount is borrowed by the government, whole amount borrowed by the government. See, so the funds available for private sector now it's very low amount because a major amount of funds borrowed by the government, then funds left for private sector is very low amount. Okay, just think about it. What's about, so availability of fund for private sector is now very less, but demand side, the demand for fund from the private sector. So demand for fund by the private sector is really very higher one. It's very highly higher. Higher means suppose this fund was available for private sector, so that much also demand. Let us consider. So the availability of funds has declined, but demand by the private sector remain more or less same. So demand from the private sector remains same, but supply has declined due to more borrowing by the government. So what situation is going to create in the market? In market, it is going to create excess demand for funds. Excess demand of funds. There are so many borrowers, they want to borrow, particular investors, they want to invest more, they need fund. But banking sector on the whole economy having the low availability of fund. Why? Because that moment government has withdrawn the money from the economy. So this excess demand for funds is giving pressure on lending rate of interest. And that is the reason lending rate of interest will start increasing. And if lending rate is going to increase or going up, go back to class. We have discussed with you, dear, investment is inversely related to rate of interest. Okay, investment is inversely related to interest rate. So the moment there is increase in rate of interest, there is a fall in investments, and there is a fall in rate of interest, there is increase in investment. So there is inverse relationship between the investment rate of interest. And here, which investment we are talking about? So this investment is known as the induced one, means private one. Okay, private one. So here you named it particularly कि private investment going to fall. And this whole phenomena is known as, this one is known as crowding out effect. It is known as crowding out effect. So one, you can say that if government facing the higher fiscal deficit and government is borrowing more and more fund from the market, then ultimate result is crowding out effect in the economy, and it means the private investment is going to fall. These things. Just think, all of you. You are getting crowding out effect. Check, dear. Tell me, dear, is it clear or you are getting any problem? I'm not getting any feedback from you. No. You can just, I'm writing it in the flow chart because better I am writing the flow chart, so you can just write it. So you can say that higher fiscal deficit FD, more okay, just let me just write in the other board. Higher fiscal deficit, higher fiscal deficit, okay, more borrowings from the market, you can write less funds available for the private investors. Excess demand for fund lending rate of interest will increase private investment decrease. It is known as crowding out effect. Yeah. Check. In the last, I have written the private investment. Arrow represents fall. If there is a higher fiscal deficit, then definitely government is going to borrow more from the market, more borrowings from the market. And what is there? Less funds available for the private sector. That is a private investors or private sectors, you can say, which leads to excess demand for fund, And if there is excess demand for fund, then finally it leads to the lending rate of interest will go up, and that results private investment will decrease, and it is known as a crowding out effect. Clear? Check, please. Okay, thank you, dear. So this part is clear. In case of IFD, if government issues GSEC, then will not the GSEC creates more liabilities in terms of interest payments? Yeah, definitely it will create. If it is so, then how can we solve the FD problem? Yeah, but at this moment you are able to solve it. this moment you are able to solve your deficit. That is the reason fiscal deficit, FRBM says that the government should cut down the fiscal deficit. Because you have to start managing the fiscal deficit, then only you are able to eliminate in the future. That is the FRBM Act is there. That's a binding to the government. When you see the budget presentation, there's always the FRBM Act is mentioned by the Ministry of Finance. They're targeting it to achieve the target of FRBM Act. And this Act is due to only for these reasons. If binding constraint is there for the government, then only you are going to decrease your fiscal deficit in the future. Clear? Okay, one more question you are sending. Sir, one query. Okay, fine. Tell me, the market borrowings means that the government is borrowing from banks and individuals who are using gilt account, right? Yeah, market borrowings means not from RBI. It includes your banks, other financial institutions, the public, even the foreigners are also there investing, but they're buying in the domestic currency. They're buying from the domestic currency. They can come in India with foreign currency, they can exchange and they can buy in the GSEC. So because it's allowed, they are also buying it. So it is the reason we are saying it is a market. So anyone who is buying, basically they are paying the money to the RBI. So now directly you can buy. So it is going through RBI to the government. It's known as a market borrowing. Clear? If you reverse it, like if government fiscal deficit is very low, so if there will be low deficits, then definitely government is borrowing the low amount in place of more, you can write low amount, and low amount, then less fund not, more fund will be available for the private sector. Excess demand not, excess supply of fund will be there in the market. Lending rate is not going to increase, but lending rate is going to decrease and private investment is going to increase. Then it is known as a crowding in effect. It is known as crowding in effect. It is known as crowding in effect. Crowding in effect. Crowding in effect. Crowding in effect. Clear? Clear? Just crowding in effect you can say. Find here? So I don't need to repeat it again. Just reverse the process. Private investment is going up, so it is known as a crowding in effect. Now, okay. Now borrowings from if suppose there is a higher fiscal deficit, more borrowings, from RBI, MS means money supply is going to increase, and if unnecessary and more increase in money supply is going to lead you higher inflations, higher inflation. And if there is higher inflations, there is a two impact. Domestic economy and next external sector. See, these two are for the same countries. But domestic economy, we are saying within the economy, within the economy. External sector means between my country and rest of the world. That is external sector we are talking about. In external sector, what will happen? Due to inflation, higher inflation, the exports is going to decrease, imports is going to up. Okay. And it is going to increase your current account deficit, CAD is going to increase, and again, no, just right. Going to increase. I think, can you make this flow chart first? Go step by step and try to make this flow chart. So borrowings from RBI, please go step by step and you please try to connect it. If you are able to understand this flow chart, then you can understand so many things. Yes, why higher fiscal deficit was one of the reason in Indian economy of BOP crisis of 1991. One way I linked it, just simple way, so you are able to connect it. Simple way. So many factors, but I'm not considering here so many factors. The simple way I'm trying to connect you. And recently you can see Sri Lanka, they're also facing BOP crisis. So even Sri Lankan economy, you can also explain, yes, how the higher fiscal deficit is going to create the BOP problem. You can do that. So this interlink is first you write, all of you. Yes, dear. Okay. Just give me, I'm just answering your question. Meanwhile, you write the flow chart. Then I have to discuss this flow chart. And you are asking, sir, temporarily we meet the FD by issuing G6. Fine. But we are also creating debts for the future budgets. Clear? Because we have to pay the principal amount as well as interest. Isn't? Yeah, you are true, dear. I'm not denying that. We have to pay principal plus interest amount in the future. And that is the reason always we are saying that we made the policy like FRBM Act. Government should cut cut the fiscal deficit, maintain the low fiscal deficit. Because you understand, if this time government is going for higher fiscal deficit and higher fiscal deficits in the long term, you are going to land up at the condition like the Sri Lanka. What is happening? See the Sri Lankan economy. Let me come in. Just think first, and this flowchart I will discuss with you. What you are asking, I'm not denying that, you are right. The temporary is fine. What the Sri Lanka government done it? Did it. And why Sri Lankan government recently, they are facing the huge problem. If you go and see the Sri Lankan economy, then their expenditure was really much more. And most of the expenditure was populist measures. Only for coming in power, government spend huge money to make the public happy. Okay, they cut down the taxes, receipt decline, and overall deficit was much more. Sri Lankan economy, huge amount they borrowed from the central bank, their own central bank, and that results huge money supply in the country. Created inflation, and slowly this way they also affected the balance of payment deficits and balance payment crisis. So yes, it is going to happen in the future, and it is the reason that why there is a binding constraint. It is for the government. The government should maintain the fiscal deficit, should not go to the higher level of fiscal deficit what is target is given. So if you start maintaining the lower fiscal deficit, then only there is a possibility in the future you are going to sustain. Because just you have seen that from these discussions, the government is not printing the money. Okay, so government has to spend the money as per their resources what they are getting it. If they are not able to do that, then finally they are landing up to the borrowings. They have to borrow from the market and see the results. That time there is going to create the crowding out effect. Here it's going to create the whole part of the economy is going to be affected, adversely affected. So that is the reason we are, there is a pressure on the government. You always cut down the fiscal deficit. Any state or any central government, if they are not going to maintain their expenditure receipts, they are going to face some, adverse impact. In short term, people are really very happy because they are getting benefits, but in economics, we are saying there is no free lunch. If you are getting the free lunch, then definitely at the cost of someone else. If you are getting free lunch today, then you have to pay price tomorrow. If one section of the public is getting the free lunch, then that money is borne by, the cost is borne by the other section of the society. If all are going to get the benefits, in the future you have to pay that. It's a very simple concept. And that's what you are asking, and that's the answer is this. So RBI, when borrow money, then money supply is not decreased. So RBI, when borrow money, what you are trying to say? See, RBI is not going to borrow money here in this case. Government is borrowing money from the RBI. Go back to my earlier class, I have discussed with you the monetary system. And I made the RBI just above than the economy. That day we have discussed. Any amount of money, if it comes from RBI to economy, then ultimately there is an increase in money supply in the economy. And if money goes from economy to RBI, then there is a fall in the money supply. Since government is facing high deficit, so government is going to borrow money from the RBI. So money comes from RBI to economy means ultimately there is increase in money supply. Clear? So this means such huge borrowings by the government contradicts government's aim of higher economic growth and development. So this where RBI's role comes in to reduce repo rate so as to encourage investment. See dear, again you are going to do the same things. Always decrease in repo rate and increase in liquidity in the economy is not the solution. It is you have to think about the requirement in the economy. Requirement in the economy. Anything excessive of that is not good. But if you do in the limit, what is the requirement? Always it is good. Government has to go in deficit, no doubt. But there should be limit. Like I discussed with you in fiscal deficit under FRBM Act, 3% is allowed. Yeah, FRBM Act allowed 3% fiscal deficit. You can go for that. But 3% due to what? 3% due to the capital expenditure, not for the revenue expenditure. So at least that much is allowed. You can borrow it. But excessive borrowing is always creating the problem. Always creating the problem. And next you are asking, sir, if government borrows from RBI, then from where the money will be given to government by RBI? Yes, by printing new currency. RBI will print, because RBI has money. But the RBI keep this money for the other purpose, the requirement of the banking system. So generally, RBI prints money and they're lending to the government. Yeah, generally prints because RBI has to maintain the assets and liabilities. So GSEC they will take from the government, they will keep in the assets form, and equivalent amount of liabilities they can create. And the money is the liability of the RBI. Go back to the earlier class I have discussed. In assets we have taken the government for foreign currencies, gold and the GSECs. And the right side we have taken the liabilities of the RBI, that is the 2 rupees and above denominated notes. So if they are keeping the in securities, the equivalent amount they can print the new currency. They can lend to the government. It may be RBI withdrawing from market. No. RBI is not going to withdraw from the market. Always borrowings from the market is done by the government. Yes, RBI is doing, but in behalf of Government of India. Government of India borrowing means RBI is doing all the work. Okay. Second, sir, is there any particular situations when the government borrows from RBI instead of market and vice versa? See, even in this pandemic, the government is borrowing for the short term, very short, and short term borrowing is allowed. They're doing that. I will discuss you long term borrowing is not allowed under the FRBM Act 2003, but short term government is managing this. Okay, so how India's fiscal center of gravity has rapidly shifted from center to the states. Yeah, this flowchart I will discuss you, dear. I will discuss tomorrow. Don't worry. What do you want to say, dear? How India's fiscal center of gravity has rapidly shifted from center to the states. The reason is what? See, central government has so many options. The borrowing from market, borrowing from the RBI, and borrowing from the other countries. But the state government has very limitations. And state governments today, they started spending money of significant proportions only on populist measures. For long term, it's not good for the country or any state. Like some states started giving you free electricity. Okay. Some states started giving you free communications. You can travel bus freely. They started giving you, free water connections. Free water. They're not charging anything. So if you see, and some like the loan waiver to the so many sections of the society, there is again created problem in the banking system. Okay. So if you think so many country state I'm talking about, they started implementing some projects, some policies, which is not going to create any assets and the capital. But only due to the populist measures, government is spending huge amounts. Okay. And this expenditure, where you have to give this burden? Limitation, there is a limitation of the resources, but you are spending more because you have want to stay yourself in the power, and you have to just, I mean, manipulate the public. So in this way, you always keeps the deficit and use borrowings. You are going for that. So finally, it is going to create the problem the overall the states, and all of us is going to face this problem. Clear? So you write this flow chart, and the impact from here to here I will discuss it tomorrow. Okay. So thank you everyone.